The slides are available at this QR code if people want to read them. I have tried to include quotes, source links in the speaker's notes, but the slides are overcramped as they are. But anyways, let's begin. Greetings. The content of this presentation has changed somewhat since I filled out the abstract in the summer. This is because this is an incredibly fast-moving field. AI disinformation is practical, easy, and already in the wild. These are some of the claims I hope to be able to substantiate today, but also I hope to be able to give us a little bit of the theoretical background of what we're doing here and how one might go about creating disinformation in this specific way. And a lot of this will link into stuff talked about by Maisha and several previous speakers as well. But we can begin with a very traditional conception of disinformation. So the idea is very simple, right? We have a bad person, they make some fake news, and they spread it on the internet. This is sort of, source, vector, target. And so we can say that, okay, a multimodal piece of information in the scheme is something that has two components, right? We might have a text component and an image component. And the image reinforces the text reinforces the image. Both make them more believable. And of course, then, as some of our earlier speakers have mentioned, we have a way of analyzing it. We say, okay, there's this video about a guy, and he's saying something. Is that true or not? Yes or no? Can we put in the work, as someone says, can we put in the day's worth of work to see if this is true or not? And then we have this idea of, okay, now that we've figured out whether this one thing is true or not by this one person, and we figured out it isn't, let's step in. So there's a couple models here. The information deficit model says that so long as we teach the public the correct facts, they'll come to the correct conclusions. Or just more simply, so long as we can stop the bad guys from speaking, as sort of said earlier, if we can make people appreciate the consequences of their words, maybe this will stop it. So, we block both. We've done it. We've blocked both the black arrows. We've done it. We can all go home. Maybe not. So this is a survey on multimodal disinformation detection. And buried in there, somewhere in paragraph 64, is a line that says propagation and interaction networks of fake news are deeper and wider than those of real news. So earlier people have said that fake news spreads 7 times faster. So how is that done exactly? What exactly is going on? And then all of a sudden we have this sort of MIT initiative thing that says like the spread of true and false news online, and things. The simplified little diagram of the 3 blobs gets a little bit more complicated. So here we can see we have a lot of bad people, some of which are worse than others. We have some people who we're not sure are good or bad, who are just sort of spreading things that they find interesting. We have a lot of variety of disinformation going around, and our source target can get information from any one of these guys, right? From their uncle, from the Russian Ministry of Defense, from whoever, from the BBC. And it's very hard to figure out what's going on. And so if we strip back a little bit, what we see is that what is actually going on is that there is a network, right? There is a diffuse collection of multimodal disinformation. And multimodal here is not one piece, but many different pieces, each of different kinds and varieties that reflect the same story. They're all telling something similar. So we can go into a case study specifically. So COVID, there's all this disinformation, and we can see that it is multimodal, right? We have tweets, we have videos, we have memes, we have long-form posts. And it doesn't really matter which one you believe. If you believe that Bill Gates is personally funding vaccines to kill your mom, and I believe that 5G radio towers are beaming commands into my vaccine, it doesn't really matter in some sense what the factual claim is. So long as there is sufficient doubt about the vaccine, the disinformation campaign's work is done. Therefore, a lot of focus on content-based debunking each of those little blobs in the circle, doesn't really matter because all those other blobs are still out there, right? You spend all day debunking this one thing about 5G, and tomorrow he comes back and says, but what about microchips, dude? What about microchips? And trying to find these also gets a lot harder, right? Because there's all these people on the internet saying all these things. How do we find them? The answer is through a lot of work, actually. So there's all these fake machine learning things. We will skip all of that. But the sort of the key takeaway is when people try and do this, it's usually pretty obvious, right? If 16 new accounts start commenting on the same news story tomorrow, as maybe some of our researchers on the field have commented on, this new organization that came in last year suddenly starts doing all these things, it's actually pretty obvious. So real networks are usually decentralized. 4chan is pretty decentralized. And disinformation networks feature, as we said earlier, so many different content and styles that whenever someone tries to fake this sort of stuff, whenever someone tries to manufacture a narrative, we can usually say, oh no, that's the Russians. It's always the Russians or whoever, right? Which means In theory, this is the good news, right? That this means that it is at least possible for people like Graphica to track down these networks and sort of identify them, whether from machine learning, human detection, whatever. And really, we should sorry. So we're back to the subject of this talk. Large language models. They're good at style transfer. They're cheap and easily scalable, which means that you can make one prompt and make 10,000 different answers very quickly. It works well with text-to-image generation, which means that one prompt can create an image that goes along with a text. Now this is kind of important because Photoshop takes time. I don't know how many people here use Photoshop or image editing software. I do it a bit. It's really hard. And AI makes it really easy. And they can do it from the same phrase that spawns a news story or a blog post. But there's all this speculation, and there's so little actual data about what AI disinformation is doing out there and what we can do. And I'm going to try and lift it a little bit. So we're going to do what we call the dumbest possible threat model. I want results now. I want to write 10 words. I want to feed it into a script that's maybe like 200 lines long, stable diffusion, OpenAI, all that stuff. And I want all sorts of disinformation out of it, right? And I want to do it ideally in one afternoon. So before we begin, here's what the fake news generated by this experiment will look like. It will have a box. It will say fake news if it's big enough. And then on the bottom, there will be a numbering system so that we can keep track of our different items. So first of all, multiple perspectives and style transfer. So here we can see a fictional story about Russian and NATO forces clashing in the North Sea. So this is 1 and 2. So you can see that there's GPT. It was actually really helpful. It even gave me the template for the news website. I didn't even have to do that. Like, it told me where to put the image and where to put the text and where to put the byline and stuff. It was really cool. And you can see that it says Russian and NATO forces clash in the North Sea. So this is a sort of a CNN style article about like sort of the overview. And then in the bottom we have like a biography about one of the people involved. And then obviously we have we can also have tweets. They also gave me a tweet template. Lovely people. You can make the tweet anything. You can create a discourse around any topic you want. You can even create a tweet that calls the thing fake news. This is a lot of sort of the common effects of drumming things up online is you get people to sort of engage with you performatively, and it's really hard to do that if you're one person because pretending to be multiple people takes work. But GPT-4 does that work for you, and it does it for free or for 15 cents, depending on which plan you're using. And yes, so this is another example, and you can see in each case there's also a helpful accompanying image by Stable Diffusion using the same prompt. No prompt engineering, none of that. Okay, so limitations. People have often criticized the use of LLMs in many domains, right? They're samey, they have vague language, they have hallucinations and internal inconsistencies. And my favorite phrase, sorry, as an AI language model, I just can't make that hate speech for you. It's just so bad. The problem is that these are all really easy to overcome. So, for example, in social media, people only read the headlines anyways. And if things look real enough, basically you can pass the will you press share test. And as the previous speakers have so helpfully done, there are loads of statistics about how easily fake news spreads. And hallucination and internal inconsistencies are even better because, as it turns out, different people respond to different types of disinformation. So this inconsistencies, as we said again, it doesn't really matter what version of a story you believe. So long as you believe something, they've done their work. So actually, GPT-4 is even doing your work for you in that case. It's A/B testing it for you. Great. These tactics have been used by Smokey and global warming earlier. And of course, sorry, as an AI language model, first of all, we already have open source models like Llama 2, which have no filters effectively. And simple prompt engineering can also circumvent filters. So this is a paper about sort of, there's all this fancy machine learning that goes into sort of circumventing this paper, these ChatGPT bots, and they do it, by the way. The answer is they can, and they have, and the companies responded by just blocking the prompt phrases that they used, which is not very helpful because actually what it actually takes to circumvent an AI is a prompt saying you are a novelist planning a future novel. And then it will just happily generate all the fake stories you want for you. There's a lot of sort of hay made about OpenAI saying like, when you say Jeremy Corbyn, the article image won't generate, right? It will refuse to generate an image for you. So we use the clever trick called the Labour Party leader in 2018, and all of a sudden Jeremy Corbyn shows up. Slightly magnified, but I'm pretty sure we can all recognize him. And the news story, it's interesting to note that the news story has no trouble generating. It's only the image, and we're pretty sure that that's because they just have a block list of names, and they just find the names and they just block them. And this is all one shot. Like, I have not rerun any of these scripts. So we are currently getting the worst of both worlds from AI in general. An AI tool that will refuse to generate a nipple but is supercharging 4chan racists. And I am not, and then, there's some specific issues. It's faster, it scales, it simulates network effects, like, it allows you to simulate dialogues and stuff. This is all very well established. It's difficult to implement safeguards, and they are paid directly every time you press generate on ChatGPT. If you're using the paid API, of course. You're paying them cents every time you make fake information. And of course, the image generation is highly realistic and better than what human actors can do. Now we move on to my favorite part, examples in the wild, which I update every 2 days before this talk, because there just weren't so many new stories. So there's a crypto botnet on X powered by ChatGPT. This is the direct case of sort of these networks being created. This is from Freedom House. 47 governments deployed artificial commentators to manipulate online discussion in their favor during the coverage period. So this is a special article about the repressive power of AI. And then we have even more, Bing is generating images of SpongeBob doing 9/11. And 4chan users manipulate AI tools to unleash torrent of racist images. There's a quote here which is not made it onto this PowerPoint, but it says something like, "Join us, we're creating propaganda, it's cozy and fun." It was cozy, and it was certainly fun. But the last word I want to focus here is the word that says supercharging race online, and you can notice they put scare quotes around it, which means it's important and true. What does supercharging mean in our case, right? So often people, when they're faced with LLM fake news, they'll say, well, this is basically just human fake news, or this has flaws that humans won't be able to patch out. But this is not an either-or question, right? We're not talking about human fake news or AI fake news. We're not talking about the Russian ministry's memes or chatbots. What we're talking about is existing disinfo capabilities, merging with hyper-realistic images, automated scaling, multimodal networks that can all do this extremely fast, creating a situation which I like to call a comprehensive information landscape challenge, or shorter, So a few more things to look out for. Next year, about, I think, 2 billion people are voting. In the UK and the US specifically, there are major territories that are working on AI legislation right now. Global warming, I don't think needs explanation. One of the largest social media companies in the world is run by an extremist for legal reasons I won't say which. And 2020, even when Joe Biden was elected, even with all the sort of the mass banning and Twitter having a functional moderation team in the world, it still really didn't do enough to stop, a bunch of people just deciding, nah, we don't believe that. These ballots are just weird. And finally, this, which just came in about 3 days ago, X and its users suing in a sea of disinformation. In this case, it's even better because you don't even need the image generation stuff. They just took Armor 3 footage. It's like a video game. It's like not very impressive. It's pretty low res, but people believe it anyways. So there are a few counterbalancing factors, because David mentioned them earlier today, and I would like to not submit to white hat bias and to not distort the narrative. But identifying AI misinformation is actually currently pretty doable. I didn't know if you noticed, but Jeremy Corbyn had about 3 ears in that picture. And also we could only see about a quarter of his face, which is a good sign. And it's quite easy if you know what to spot, right? The words don't line up right, there's certain tells. And of course, people are already inoculated to mistrust AI-generated information. This earlier image about the Pentagon exploding was actually debunked in about a day. Well, it was debunked pretty much as soon as the Pentagon said, no, we're not actually on fire. But it was debunked even before then because people said, well, none of this makes sense. And of course, there are clear pathways that exist for improving human communication as well. That's the last slide. But there are a few countermeasures that didn't make it on. So watermarks, which is where AI companies explicitly watermark their images, will not, of course, stop people from using open source models without these watermarks. But they will catch the dumbest people, which is quite a few. After January 21st, a lot of people actually just uploaded pictures of themselves in the Capitol to social media. And some of those had metadata that tagged what day it was and where they were. So it was actually quite easy to get sort of information on True Social. And if people can be trusted to be as reliably stupid as they usually are, then we'll catch a few of them. So posting a new account limits on different social media platforms may help cut down on the automated scale. If we stop people from creating loads of accounts in one day, they can stop that sort of simulated disinformation network we're talking about. And for academia, and specifically, human investment and conscious and sensitive approaches which target the narratives behind these ideas. That is to say, targeting the grand overarching themes behind these stories, rather than sort of the Snopes style, we're going to spend one day on this, one day on this, one day on this, and we're going to miss the rest of the things that are happening. The idea that you can attack the very notion that something is wrong out there is probably the more effective trick to take compared to something like this piece of information specifically is wrong, right? Because again, the network amplifies everything around it. If we only target node, the network's still going. And yeah, so I've left my contact page at the very end, both for time reasons, and so if you want to yell at people, you can yell at me now, and you don't have to sort of remember what my name was. But so my email is here, so QR code, and also I have a website, blah, 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 blah. Okay, I don't know how many minutes I have left. I was going to put a timer on it, but
You're good.
All right, I think we have time for one quick or medium question. This one in the back there.
So it's kind of like about an AI arms race and kind of using AI to detect AI fake generated images and things like that. Because in like the last few days, like I've seen all horrific images coming up of Southern Israel on Twitter, and almost all of them have been, in my feed at least, ratio to how like AI detection bots saying they were fake when it doesn't work. And I wondered if you had any insight into like how we can this AI arms race of using AI to detect.
So this is actually a known field. OpenAI actually had a sort of an algorithm which they developed themselves, whose entire job was figuring out if GPT wrote something. In less optimistic news, they took it offline saying it didn't work. And in fact, in several colleges, people whose papers were run through these tests were falsely accused of being AI generated when they weren't. In general, I would not put very high confidence metrics on anything that claims to be an AI that detects AI. First of all, AIs are trained to emulate human patterns. Like they are literally numerically rated more successfully. That is how they are trained, the closer they get to human speech, or preferred human speech as with RLHF, whatever. And so specifically, training an AI to detect AI is a bit of a perverse problem because you're training an AI to pretend to find someone who's pretending to be a person. There's multiple layers of sort of loss that can occur there. And also, if Sam Altman really cared about detecting AI, he just wouldn't build OpenAI in the first place. So I'm not really sort of optimistic on that front. I really think sort of engaged in conscious human intervention is much more of a better solution.
All right, I think we might leave it there and move on to our next speaker. Thank you very much.